Hello, and welcome to our channel. My name is Detective Joe, and today we'll talk about one of the most notorious criminals of the 20th century, Charles Manson. His name has become synonymous with evil, manipulation, and the dark side of the hippie movement. In the late 1960s, Manson created a cult known as the Family, whose members committed a series of brutal murders that shocked America. Today we'll try to understand who Charles Manson was, how he managed to turn ordinary young people into killers, and what impact his crimes had on American culture. Charles Mills Manson was born on November 12, 1934, in Cincinnati, Ohio. His mother, Kathleen Maddox, was only 16 years old at the time of his birth and led a chaotic lifestyle filled with alcohol and casual relationships. Manson never knew his biological father, and his mother often left him with relatives or strangers while she was serving time in prison. According to Manson himself, his childhood was a series of rejections and betrayals. By the age of 13, he had already committed his first crime, a robbery. This was followed by a series of arrests for car theft, fraud, and pimping. By the time he turned 32, Manson had spent more than half his life behind bars. It was in prison that Manson developed his unique ability to manipulate people. He studied psychology books, took guitar lessons, and became interested in Scientology and other spiritual practices. He was preparing for freedom, but not for an honest life, and he was preparing to create his own cult. In 1967, after being released from prison, Manson moved to San Francisco, which at that time was the epicenter of the hippie movement. There, he began to gather around himself a group of followers, mostly young women from troubled backgrounds. Manson offered them what they lacked: acceptance, understanding, and a sense of belonging. He presented himself as a prophet and spiritual leader who had answers to all questions. His charisma, combined with the use of psychedelic drugs and sexual manipulation, allowed him to gain complete control over his followers. By 1968, the Family, as Manson called his group, had grown to about 30 people. They lived communally, first in San Francisco, and later moved to Spahn Ranch, an abandoned film set near Los Angeles. At the ranch, Manson's control over his followers intensified. He introduced strict rules, controlled their diet, sleep, and sexual relationships. He would often organize LSD sessions during which he would preach his philosophy, a bizarre mixture of Christianity, Scientology, and his own interpretations of Beatles songs. Manson was particularly obsessed with the Beatles' White Album, especially the song Helter Skelter. He interpreted it as a prophecy about an upcoming race war that would destroy America. According to his theory, after this war, he and his followers would emerge from hiding to rule over the survivors. This apocalyptic vision became the foundation of Manson's ideology and eventually led to the tragic events of August 1969. On the night of August 8th to 9th, 1969, 4 members of the Manson family, Charles Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, broke into the home of film director Roman Polanski and his wife, actress Sharon Tate, in Beverly Hills. Polanski was away in Europe, but Tate, who was 8.5 months pregnant, was at home with friends: hairstylist Jay Sebring, aspiring screenwriter Wojciech Frykowski, and coffee heiress Abigail Folger. What happened that night was a scene of unimaginable horror. All 4 people in the house, as well as Stephen Parent, a teenager who happened to be visiting the property's caretaker, were brutally murdered. The killers left the word P.I.G. written in blood on the front door. The next night, August 9th to 10th, Manson personally led another group of his followers to the home of supermarket executive Leno LaBianca and his wife Rosemary. The couple was tied up and stabbed multiple times. The killers left messages written in blood on the walls, including "Helter Skelter." These murders shocked America not only with their brutality, but also with their apparent senselessness. The victims had no connection to Manson or his followers. The investigation initially struggled to find leads, but a breakthrough came when Susan Atkins, who was in jail on unrelated charges, boasted to her cellmate about the murders. This led to the arrest of Manson and other family members in December 1969. The trial of Charles Manson and his followers began on June 15, 1970, and lasted 9 months, becoming the longest in California history at that time. It wasn't just a trial, it was a real show. Manson turned the court proceedings into a theater of the absurd. He appeared with a swastika carved into his forehead, shouted insults at the judge, and made strange statements to the press. His followers, especially the women, imitated his behavior. They also carved swastikas on their foreheads, shaved their heads, and sang songs outside the courthouse. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi presented the theory that Manson, although not directly participating in the murders, was their ideological inspiration and organizer. Under California law, this made him just as guilty as the direct perpetrators. On March 29, 1971, the jury found Manson and 3 of his followers, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten, guilty of first-degree murder. They were initially sentenced to death, but after the abolition of the death penalty in California in 1972, their sentences were commuted to life imprisonment. Charles Manson died on November 19, 2017, at the age of 83, having spent almost 50 years behind bars. But his influence on American culture continues to this day. The Manson case changed America. It symbolically ended the era of the summer of love and the naive belief that counterculture brought only positive changes. As prosecutor Bugliosi wrote, Manson killed the 60s. Manson became a symbol of evil in American culture. His image has been exploited in numerous books, films, and TV series. The most famous book about him, Helter Skelter, by Vincent Bugliosi, sold over 7 million copies. But what's most disturbing is that even after imprisonment, Manson continued to attract followers. He received thousands of letters from fans, and some women even proposed marriage to him. In 2014, 26-year-old Afton Elaine Burton announced her engagement to the 80-year-old Manson, although the wedding never took place. Psychologists explain this phenomenon by the fact that Manson embodies rebellion against the system, and his charisma continues to work even through television screens and book pages. The story of Charles Manson is not just a crime chronicle. It's a story about the power of manipulation, about the dark side of charisma, and about how easily people can be led astray when they're searching for meaning and belonging. Manson exploited the vulnerabilities of lost young people, their desire for acceptance and spiritual guidance. He turned their search for freedom and love into blind obedience and violence. His case serves as a warning about the dangers of cults and charismatic leaders who demand absolute loyalty. Perhaps the most important lesson from the Manson story is the need to maintain critical thinking, even when faced with charismatic personalities who offer simple answers to complex questions. The tragedy of the Manson family reminds us that true freedom comes not from following others blindly, but from the ability to think independently and take responsibility for our own choices. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. What other stories would you like to hear? See you next time.